What habituation really means for tinnitus. Now, this is an educational discussion based on lived experiences, my own, and reputable sources, not medical advice. Habituation is a word that is often used when discussing tinnitus, but it is also one of the most misunderstood. Some people interpret habituation as ignoring the sound or forcing themselves not to think about it. Others assume it means the tinnitus will disappear completely. In reality, habituation refers to something more specific. It describes the brain's ability to reduce its response to a signal that is no longer considered important. This is a natural process. The brain is constantly filtering information, deciding which signals require attention and which can remain in the background. Habituation is a mechanism that allows that filtering to happen. It is the reason you can sit in a room with a steady background noise and stop noticing it after a short time. The sound has not changed. What has changed is the brain's response to it. Tinnitus can follow a similar pattern. In the early stages, the sound may feel unfamiliar and draw attention. The brain may treat it as something that needs monitoring or evaluation. This is a normal response to any new sensory input. But over time, as the brain learns that the signal is not important, its response begins to change. Instead of continuously bringing the sound into awareness, it gradually allows it to remain in the background. This is habituation. It does not require effort in the way people sometimes imagine. It is not about actively trying to ignore the sound. In fact, actively trying to ignore something often keeps attention focused on it. Habituation happens when the brain no longer sees a reason to prioritize the signal. That shift usually develops through familiarity. When a signal is repeated over time without any negative consequence, the brain becomes less interested in it. It recognizes that the signal does not need ongoing attention. This process is not always linear. There can be periods where tinnitus feels less noticeable, followed by times when it becomes more prominent again. This does not mean habituation has stopped or reversed. It simply reflects the dynamic nature of attention and perception. The overall trend for many people is that the brain becomes increasingly efficient at filtering the signal. Another important point is that habituation does not necessarily mean silence. The sound may still be present. What changes is how much attention the brain gives to it. When attention decreases, the perceived intensity often decreases as well. This is why people sometimes describe tinnitus as being there but not bothering them. The signal exists but is no longer central. There is also a connection between habituation and the brain's emotional response. When a signal is interpreted as neutral, the brain has less reason to prioritize it. If a signal is associated with concern or uncertainty, attention tends to remain focused on it. As the brain becomes more familiar with tinnitus and no longer treats it as something that requires evaluation, its response becomes more relaxed. This supports the habituation process. It is also worth noting that habituation is not unique to tinnitus. It is a general feature of how the brain operates across all sensory systems. The brain is designed to conserve energy and avoid unnecessary processing. It does this by filtering out signals that do not require attention. Tinnitus simply becomes one of those signals over time. The key idea is that habituation is not something you force. It is something the brain naturally moves towards when a signal is constantly interpreted as unimportant. Understanding this can change how the process is viewed. Rather than trying to make the sound disappear, the focus becomes understanding how the brain interacts with it. And as that interaction changes, the experience often becomes less intrusive. The sound may remain, but the way it is perceived continues to evolve. Thanks for listening to this episode from the David Health Channel.